7:03, call the meeting to order. Will you please join me in the pledge of allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Miller and Mr. Dowden are absent. All of the board members are present. Mr. Board, has public notice been given?
Yes, it has.
On to the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the prior meeting minutes of September 3rd, 2025? So move. Motion made by Mr. Jones. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Sharp. Discussion? Mr. Mailing.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Forgot.
On to three information. 3A, the summary of discussions from September 3rd, 2025.
Okay, so this is, Mr. Dowdna. This is kind of a compilation of the notes that I had and have put them into some common themes that we had heard. I think what I would ask the board to do, not necessarily tonight, but as these summaries are in here, your job individually would be to make sure that you read through the summary notes and really do two things. One, make sure that the notes accurately reflect what you believe occurred at the meeting. And then two, make sure that the notes accurately reflect any specific points that you want to make sure are in the notes to be considered or to be talked about. No, I certainly don't want to leave out anything and try not to make it 8 pages long and try to provide a summary, but I do want to make sure sometimes when you compress and compact things, I don't want to leave out something that was important to any individual board member. So these are would be kind of an ongoing note taking. I'll just continue to include them in the book, so you don't need to tell me right now. But if you do see something that you think was not reflected accurately, just let me know. You can email the group and I can add that to it again, or if we omitted something that should be in there, make sure that that's included as well. But I think that's really what I would ask of you.
Any questions from the board on that? All right, 3B, the upcoming policy governance meetings.
Okay, so it's on page 11, excuse me, 11 of your book. These would be the 5 governance meetings that we've got scheduled through the end of the calendar year 2025. We can certainly see what the strategic planning schedule looks like and maybe have some more in January if we're not going to start that full blown until February or adjust accordingly, but you'll see tonight's on there. And then 2 in November, because the 4th Wednesday in November is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So we'll go the 3rd Wednesday in November and have a governance meeting. And then similarly in December, the 3rd Wednesday in December will be a governance meeting as well, because there will not be a 4th Wednesday for a regular board meeting. So still would require the board to have 3 meetings in the month, but instead of the 1st, 2nd, and 4th for November and December would be the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, as we have 2 governance meetings. Any questions on that? These are considered special meetings, so they can change as long as we give proper notice. Thank you.
It's on to discussion, 4, discussion on governance culture policies. This is a continuation of last meeting. We did the first couple of bullets on GC1, the board purpose, the board's role and accountability, focus and priorities. And left off at governing versus managing. And one of the takeaways from the last meeting was for speed and time, rather than tackle every individual line or bullet underneath those bold topics, we were going to summarize our thoughts as far as under governing versus managing. For example, The bullet points, what issues should clearly remain at the governance board level, what issues should be delegated to administration. And bullet number 2, how do we draw the line between governance and management? Would be done together. So any questions on that? Yeah. Right. So I think I will kick this one off versus kicking it out to the left. The governing versus managing. So what issues should clearly remain at the governance, the board level, and what issues should be delegated to administration? And how do we draw the line between governance and management? This is a really complex, very broad topic. So for me, how I thought of this is sort of the road we've already been going down already, where we dissolved the committees. We started putting some of those things that were not as far as required by law or policy for board to make decisions on. Some of those day-to-day operational things were kicked back to administration and the staff. Other things that were required as far as laws or policy, obviously would come back to the board, not through a committee, but more so through the open meetings, through discussion and action. So, and how I kind of approached it was that, do we manage the day-to-day? Do we, or do we let administration do that? So some things that come to mind we've already kind of done is hiring. You know, we basically, district board is the person that we would hire in a situation, the superintendent. As far as all of the hirings, the stuff that's, we've already made a decision to allow the administration to make those decisions. Excuse me, I had a cold. So some of these things we've already went down, that's kind of how I approached it. Thinking long-term, using goals and outcomes through strategic planning would basically set what is the things that we as a board control and what are the things as administration they control. So that's kind of how I approached it. We're not there yet, but we will get there. And we'll let those kind of guiding principles guide what's board and what's administration.
Okay.
And as a reminder, use your mic when you talk, please, because feedback I've gotten is you can't hear people online if it's not on. That's good.
I've actually had 3 things that feel should clearly remain with us. And that's setting the student outcome expectations, distinguished staff expectations, and then the retail benefits. I feel that those should be for sure kept with us, and as Aaron said, more the day-to-day operations. And I'm sure there'll be a few more things as we keep going through this. Pretty much everything else is going to be catch-all that the administration will be taking care of. I think we just need to define what we want to hang on to, then everything else will go to the administration.
Likewise, I was curious about how the policies would affect what we maintain oversight on. That was one of the points that so it's kind of up in the air as of yet.
Yeah, I agree. I had a hard time with it. I was thinking more long-term, but how and what and when and why do we get there is a little unknown.
Right.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think I need to have a few more examples. Or concrete examples. I need to think a little bit more about the ramifications of, you know, when things are happening across the country and across the state, you know. There are just some things that are starting to resonate with me a little bit, and I just need a little bit more time to think, but I don't disagree with anything that's been said.
I guess I went very generic on the whole thing as far as kind of like just the whole definition of governing versus managing, because I'm still learning what we're all doing. So, the governing side of things, I guess I've got a lot of what you guys have already said in here. With this, setting the guardrails, budget and finances, obviously, still, doing those. Hiring and evaluating the superintendent, setting expectations for the superintendent for, the different outcomes of things, setting that. Management, obviously, like we've talked about, the day-to-day operations, putting them back to the staff with that. Kind of like the curriculum, that was one thing we talked about too, letting that be with the staff and then just providing the board with the info and the data. Well-documented recommendations needed to make informed decisions on that stuff. Basically.
Well, I'm pretty much in agreement with everything that's been said. I think having served on the Building, Property and Transportation Committee, I think the school does their due diligence in getting the multiple bids when things are, out for bid, and then they can make that realistic choice, rather than just us kind of just agreeing with them. I think that those were the kind of things that I thought that our time could be used better. I agree with everything that Scott said, as well as Brady and everybody else. I would also add to that, any of the items, I would really like us to keep an eye on the referendum items as well. That's all I have.
Just thinking with the line between governance and management. Governance is us setting the expectation, but how do you do that? Obviously communication back and forth, what feedback we're gonna need from the administration, because we're all gonna be new at this. So if we're overstepping, which I can see us doing pretty easily because we've been in it, especially four of us. So then it'd be taking that step back and taking a look at what the perceptions are, because our perceptions could be completely different than administration. As far as we're getting into a management role, and we don't necessarily feel that way. So it's gonna have to be clear expectations, checks and balances with the administration. Like we said, throughout the whole, open, honest, communication.
Co-created, established working agreements be important, right? Like we create those together. And the other thing that was coming up for me when everyone else was talking was, this idea of ethical decision making. Where does the buck stop here? Does it stop somewhere? Like, that's the dilemma I'm trying to work through. I don't think we need to micromanage.
Yeah, that's one of the things, is the hows. It'll be difficult
Yeah.
sometimes to, for us, as much as we really want to get our hands dirty and get in the weeds, the hows is not really our place. And, even some of these future GCs, it was impossible for me to even write answers to them because you're overstepping policies. So yes, I totally understand where you're coming from, and that when you think of the governance, the board and the day-to-day operations, the management piece, it's the hows we gotta step back from and set the goals, outcomes, and expectations, and what we want, and as we go down that road, that's where we're gonna get the more clear direction on this, because this was a very difficult one for me, because it's so broad. It's kind of how I approached it. But the house can be very difficult to overcome.
I was looking at it as policy based. I mean, once we see what we're gonna have for policies, then
stick to the policies.
Mhm.
And we've been doing that actually for the last couple of years, we're referencing back to policy, back to policy, back to policy. And as a board, we've gotten pretty good at, referencing our own policies, whether it's through public communications or internally in the school. So we have been practicing it, but as we go on this road, as exciting as it's gonna be, it will be difficult to take that hat off and let them figure out how we get there.
Some of that, we're gonna have to trust our administrators to get to the end result. It's kind of their how to do it. I wouldn't necessarily have done it that way, but if it works, so be it. Kind of thing, because it could be that what they think of as their way to get to this end might be the complete opposite of what I would be thinking how to get there, because I might have a preconceived notion on, hey, this is our expectation, this is how we should get there. And they say, hold on, no, I think we need to go this way, and then we can make a loop or whatever. So just being able to step back and giving them the latitude for us to trust that they're gonna get there and do the right thing. Because again, we say it a lot, they're the ones here every day, they're the ones working in the trenches, and what I might think is the best way to do it might not even be feasible. So just having that trust in our folks to get to the end result.
There's, incompatibility of offices and policies, all sorts of things that we gotta be aware of as we do this, so. All right, anything else on the governing versus managing before we move on?
I was just gonna say that the one thing that I put on here was clear roles and responsibilities. If we make that very clear, then the way you were mentioning, like, are we gonna jump back in there and overstep or whatever? If we make it very clear what we want, then we've got something to come back to, like, no, we said for them to get this, and as long as they get to the outcome and communicate back to us that they got to the outcome, then that's all we really need for it.
If we say we want Steve, take us to Miami, we end up in Sacramento on the way. As long as we get to Miami,
Yeah.
it all worked out in the end.
And we're fiscally responsible.
All right, so leadership and vision. What should strategic leadership look like for the board, for our board? How far into the future should our vision and direction extend? 3 years, 5 years, longer? How should we engage the community in shaping that long-term vision? Mr. Miller?
We've already said it, well, we have to set the targets. We have to inspect what we expect, so reviewing progress and evaluating outcomes. Might be midpoint checks where we, if the expectation is, hey, we want to have this cleared up or addressed within 2 years, then we need to have checkpoints to make sure that we're on the right path for that. I think initially, we need to have a 1-year plan, 3-year, 5-year, probably even go as far as 10-year. Because just looking at finances and student population, and where our money is really coming from, we may or may not be able to, we might have to shift dramatically. Mr. Board brought it up at the meeting the other night at the Phoenix Center, that our referendum for operational is coming to an end. And so we're gonna have to evaluate at that point. So that obviously is gonna be part of our, has to be a cutoff point for looking forward. Then as far as engaging the community and shaping that, we're gonna be doing that coming up here in January, February. Community forums, Q&A sessions, might be town hall meetings, it could be coffee with the board, being involved in community events, being involved with city council, being involved with county board. And just having our ears open, we haven't done a survey in a minute, so obviously those are gonna be, probably need to be part of that. Okay.
Yeah, I concur on that. I really stress the finding out what the community needs and expects.
Which might be different.
From our graduates, and focus on the results of that.
That could actually be a good one with, we did it a little bit where we contacted former graduates. Yeah. And, finding out what our most recent, and then working backwards to see how, because one of our expectations that we have, if we continue that, is having people post high school ready for whatever life brings them, whether it's career, whether it's further education, whatever the case might be. They come back in 5 years and say, hey, everything was great, I felt prepared, or if they come back and say, I was completely lost, I felt like I was drowning or whatever. You'll have to communicate with them as well.
I agree, yeah. Some of the things that are coming up for me as far as the direction that we move should be informed by the community. But right now, what's resonating with me is, you know, those community groups that normally don't get a voice or don't have a voice or aren't asked at the table. I really feel strongly we need to seek them out. We need to understand deeply the position of everyone in our community and the needs of everyone in our community. And I think we have to be creative in making connections with those folks. And not just an invitation, but we may have to go places to go into spaces where they are and not have them come where we are. Because some of these spaces aren't as welcoming. Whatever it takes, I think, for us to get the right information, is something I think we should consider. Yeah. That's what's really coming up for me, other than everything else that was said. I want to make sure that when we say we are representing our community, we're representing our community.
Leadership and vision. First thing I put is we lead by example. We hold ourselves, we're holding the staff accountable, but we hold ourselves accountable. And personally myself, even at a higher level than what we would hold them accountable. We set forth a strategy and we implement it. And as far as how many years that goes, you know, thinking of the 3, 5 longer, exactly what Scott was saying, you know, setting it out because we don't know how it's all gonna turn out, how it's gonna go. I put maybe 3 years, review how things are going. If all is going and good, keep it going. You know, as things go, if we need to change a few things, you know, kind of move things as it goes, as we get feedback as, you know, as soon as something isn't going well, you know, we get the feedback and go, okay, let's reroute that right now, change it. Instead of sitting on it, letting it fail, just getting that feedback back, you know, so that we can stay on top of it, keep things moving up, is the way I have it. Engaging the community for sure, whether we meet singly with people or a group with people, short surveys, different things like that. I always think of scan the little QR code. That's the biggest thing right now. You know, everybody's got a cell phone at home. Scan the QR code, take 2 minutes and fill out a survey and send it back to us. And just, you know, I guess that's basically it with what I have. But yeah, definitely leading by example with this.
Well, she stole mine. I'm a big one. I say it a million times. We lead by example. I think as far as the amount of time out, I think we definitely have to look 10 years out. You know, just like everything, you know, the equipment, whatever it is, 10 years out, but we have to review it annually or every 2 years or something to make sure we're hitting that along the way. I would love to see more people attend our school board meetings, whether here or online. But what I did see, and I think what really helped is when I also attended the collaboration meeting, when Steve spoke about, you know, I think sometimes people, when they think of declining enrollment, they think, hey, losing students. Not that okay, when I, was in school, there were 8 kids in my family. You know, I have 2 children, you know, that's what's happening, is going to a lot smaller, so I think there's kind of a difference in that, and I did hear people in the audience say, I didn't look at it that way. You know, when you started to talk about our graduating seniors, our bigger classes, and what's coming in for 4K, and, you know, and how that's changing. I think that, having those collaboration meetings, and no matter how we do it, I think that really, brings people in to listen. I also think it took some of the, awkwardness out when you could put a question in a basket, and nobody really knew who asked the question, and then you could answer it. I think that was just a really great way to get some of the facts out and things, that we're doing differently here. So I thought that was very well done.
Yeah, so some of the things that I put down as far as what it looks like engaging, open, honest, transparent, nimble, goal-oriented, outcome-driven. Obviously, yes, leading by example, and some of the other ones are great as well as far as what it looks like. For the how far into the future, I kind of took this as a two-pronged approach for myself, like a 1 to 2 year tactical type of plan. And then having like a 3+, however long that is, I don't know. I don't know what adds value, at what point it doesn't add value, you know, so far, I have no idea. But kind of, you know, the goals and priorities, you know, the outcomes and expectations we're gonna get from the strategic planning part. You know, is that a 1 to 2 year plan? I don't know. Having another part, you know, where you layer on further out planning, that things might become that we're not aware of. I don't know. I have no idea. It's not a work in process, none of us know. But, so yeah, I kind of thought of it in 2 different approaches. As far as engaging the community, the forum, I think, is a great way of doing it. You know, we could do ad hoc committees where we can form a committee, maybe with some of the peers in the community, some administration, some board members. I don't know, you know, the options are limitless in how we do it. Yeah, that's kind of why I was at with it.
Thought that popped in my head as far as setting the timelines. If we say we want to have, close the gap, and we set it for a year, it's not realistic to be a year. Because, you know, culture it takes a while to change, those kinds of things. So I think some of it's going to have to partner with our administration, curriculum, those kind of folks, to see what is truly realistic. 5 years is way too long. Okay, we need to figure that out, but if a year is way too short to actually see real results, it's a big ship, so it takes a while to get it turned.
And the broader it is, the less frequent I would think there would be that strategic planning piece with the community. You know, if it's way too long term, as far as everything on that sheet, well, obviously you're gonna do it less frequently. So it's a little gray for me, by frequency. I don't know.
Do you mind if I ask a
Mr.
question?
Ward, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I do, if I could ask a question.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what does the board think on how long is too long before they make sure that they engage in another strategic planning session? So I think we did our last one in 2017. That's 9 years ago. That feels a little long. While it might happen more frequently, what does the board think would be the maximum that we should ever go as we look into the future on re-engaging the community in a full-fledged strategic planning session?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was stuck on it, was, you know, 1 to 2, 3+. How often, I mean, depending on the outcomes, it might be a lot less frequent, I don't know.
And we might not
Meetings
know
every
that
other
fully
year.
until we go through it. So-
Exactly.
I think some of that answer too could come from how engaged does the community get? Because we can only do so much if they don't engage with us when we're putting ourselves out there in a variety of different ways. it's gonna be a different challenge that if the community's really engaged and we get a lot of data back, it might end up being easier to make the determination that once we get through that initial process of what is that target date? What's a good timeline for that to come back through?
Is that people aren't engaged. But in this go around, my hope is that the whole FOMO thing kicks in. There's a huge fear of missing out the next time it comes. That people are super excited with what they hear is going on. And the next go around, people with that fear of missing out will get involved.
I'm curious about whether or not it's necessary to even talk about a full strategic planning process cycle if we embed really good communication strategies within our governance policies. And if we stick to making sure that we have open communication and all of the other things that we're informed. I mean, what we're doing right now, strategic planning is really getting the information that we feel like we don't have in the community. If we create processes where we are constantly in a communication cycle, whether that's once a year, once every 2 years, whatever we decide, would it be necessary to go through the whole thing again? Maybe not until for another 10 years.
Because we've done it.
Because because we're in this,
Consistently.
because we're basically in this cycle of getting their feedback, checking in, giving them the data, showing, getting input from them. And oftentimes we do these things when we feel like we need to, because we feel disconnected. So we create cycles, policies, practices, procedures, whatever, to ensure that we don't lose that. Then maybe we won't have to so often. Which would be that's a big savings. It's a process and we have to pay for it.
Anything else in that? We'll move on. Okay. Board culture and relationships. What commitments should we make to one another as board members? How should we model trust, respect, and professionalism in our work? Should we include expectations for our own ongoing improvement and professional development? Mr. Dell.
The big thing is just be honest with your thoughts and your opinions. That's the best way forward. And I think Ms. Thompson mentioned it, hold yourself to a higher standard. I know some people put it in policy. Do you really need to? I don't know. I think just present yourself the best that you can present yourself.
I agree and I disagree at the same time. I do think there should be ethical boundaries that we are held to and guiding principles. And if we move in a direction outside of that, then there should be a procedure that we have to go through. Whether that's being removed or we're put on, but I feel strongly that we need to be held to a higher standard as board members. And I'm sorry if just trying our best is, sometimes that's not enough. I mean, we have to model what we expect. And if we screw up, then there's a process we have to go through in order to maintain our board, being on the board. As far as like communication is concerned and respecting one another, I feel like we can work together to build strong working agreements and things that I am looking forward to are opportunities for us to have like real serious hard conversations, like for real. Not a bunch of people agreeing on everything, but disagreements and discord and dialogue about why we differ and what's beautiful about the difference and what's important to name when we do make, have differences. And what we can learn from one another along those lines. And I think high quality, high functioning teams do that really well. And we're a fairly new group of people working together. So it's not like we're going to start there, but it's certainly something that I think we can work toward. And in those cases, when we have a lot of input from community and we're representing different people and their beliefs, that's got to happen. It needs to happen.
When you say ethical boundaries, what are your thoughts on that?
I think we have to talk about it at the board. What would be something that would constitute unethical behavior of the board member in the community or on the board if it's not already defined in policy. I know. Background check. Right. Everyone get a pass. That would be something pretty simple.
I got a bunch here. I'm just trying to collect all my thoughts here together. What commitment should we make with one another as board members? I definitely feel like we're a team. We have to back each other up. We don't talk bad about one another out in the public, even if we have a disagreement here and we don't agree on policies, which is gonna come, but we very professionally talk about it, discuss it, and then outside, it's still, yes, I'm backing this person up. That's the decision the board made. We're all sticking to it. We're going with it. As far as trust goes, I can go on here. I've got different sayings here. Trust grows when people feel heard, not just managed. With all of us, as long as we hear each other out, we don't cut anyone off, we hear it out. The other thing I have here is we value each other. Everyone counts here. We don't disregard any of us here. Trust grows stronger when individuals are willing to take risks on behalf of each other. I kind of feel like that's what we're in with this. We're all willing to jump into this together. None of us have done this before. We're all new at this. It's going to be a learning experience for us all. And that I feel is something that's going to kind of draw us all together because we have to stick together to do this. If we're going to make this happen, we can't just bail or, if something turns out to be bad, we all get together and we're going to figure out how to make it good. Just to be a complete team on this. Will there be errors and things like that? Yes, there will be. But again, that's just demonstrating that we're human. None of us have big egos to where we're all perfect and stuff. We would like to have things come out smoothly and be ideal, but the last thing I have here, how should we engage or should we include expectations of our own ongoing improvement and professional development? I put down here most definitely yes, without a doubt. Is what I put. But trying to find the last thing I had on here with the disagreements. Oh, I had put down here, if you spend time with someone long enough, you'll find something you disagree on. But you can also find something you agree on, and we need to focus on what we can mutually edify each other in this and not dwell on the negatives.
Well, I kind of probably echo a lot of your thoughts as well. I had down, I guess we always show respect even if we don't agree. Even though I'm not a big person for confrontation, I know confrontation is good. It's better to be honest and get it out there instead of leaving frustrated. I think that's a big thing. I think honestly, doing what we're doing right now, doing this round robin and kind of making people really give their thoughts and their, where they want to see us go. I think this is all good. Instead of being just yes or yay or nay. I also, I do feel that, our board is very professional. I think we respect each other. I agree with you, Tiffany, that giving each one of us equal time and valuing what each one has to give, because we're 7 different people. And we're each gonna have our strengths and our weaknesses, but together as one, we're united. So, that's how I feel. And honestly, on the last one, I think as we get into this deeper, I think this will just come out naturally as we feel more comfortable and we open the dialogue. And I think that, it'll just come natural.
Yeah, I don't wanna repeat a lot of this stuff. But I fully expect there to be some level of disagreement as we go down this road. How we've traditionally functioned and operated as a board, it's been very, it's almost like a machine. Go through these same motions and everybody's in agreement, you know. Nothing's really standing out as, something where you're gonna bring personal bias or an agenda or whatever into the conversation. But going on this road where it's completely different, I fully expect there to be some disagreements at time, and to your point, exactly, I mean, I 100% agree with you that, disagreeing is okay. We have to, I mean, honestly, in my career, a lot of the best decisions that have come out of it and processes that have been driven from it come from a disagreement. So this is some of the things that I wrote, was like making an informed decision, removing personal bias, emotion, agendas, and all that stuff from decision making. This will be very new to us, so it can be a dangerous path potentially where some of those things can be, become part of a person's decision making, holding one another accountable to our own policies and goals. Look at maybe creating board goals and outcomes in an evaluation process. As far as ongoing improvement, professional development, we did a 4-part series earlier this year. Thought that was great. It not only was good for us, it was good for everybody that tuned into it, that came and attended the meetings, and people are still watching those meetings today. So might be a decent approach where we didn't continue to get guest speakers or somebody from WASB or CISA 3 or somebody to come in and continue to help educate not only just us as a board, but everybody along the process.
Yes. And probably one of the biggest things is if I would like us to feel comfortable enough that if I don't agree, that I'm able and willing to share that I don't agree. I think the worst thing we can do is go around the table and say, yep, 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 and then all of a sudden there's a no, and we don't know why. Because that no, and the reasons and logic behind it could influence my yes. If I know that because it could just be a different thought process, something that I didn't think of, or that perception or perspective is different than what my personal experience is, it could change things. And when we have those disagreements, being willing to maybe have a one-on-one conversation to get to know each other. kind of get an understanding of where we're coming from. My journey is different than anybody else's journey. So knowing, helping to understand where other people are coming from. Had that experience with the board in the past that I didn't know why. And then had got the opportunity to spend some time with that person and had a completely different outlook on where that person's coming from. So it's addressing the issue, not attacking the person. So this can't be personal. If it becomes personal, then that's a problem. And valuing each other, making sure that everyone's opinion holds weight to it. And it's one set of things, not where somebody should be dominating or steering the conversation in direction of where we're going. Sharing ideas, whether it's pros, cons, it's great to have all the happy, positive stuff coming out. But if there is drawbacks to going down this particular path or proving this particular thing, if there's, oh, wait, hey, did we stop to think about this and what a drawback it can be? Whether it's a financial thing, whether it's a perception of the community, whatever that case may be. Civil discord. Obviously, we're not calling names, we're not getting up yelling and screaming, pounding on the tables. There's videos all over the place where the city council meetings, school board meetings where fights happen. That makes absolutely no sense to me. It doesn't solve anything, it just creates more of a mess, so. It's being willing to share things, even if it's hard. Complex stuff is if we're open to saying, hey, tell me what you truly feel and not judge that person. Make it a lot easier to not have conflicts per se.
Well, I just want to say, I agree with that. I've said before, insurance is my wheelhouse, not necessarily education. And that's why I always appreciated Robin. I appreciate Jill, just because of the background they bring. And sometimes, I might come in ready to, think I know how I want to vote, but then they explain something to me. I have a whole different outlook. So I think that's so important to share that when, there is that, I don't know, just that knowledge. And then it helps me to realize, okay, I'm going to see it from your point of view. Now that all makes sense to me. So I think that's just super important. When you don't agree with something, is to share why, because that, again, like Scott said, it could change how you look at the whole thing when you vote.
We all need to be willing to ask questions of each other.
That's exactly.
If
that's
you
exactly
say
what
something and I'm
yeah.
just like, I don't get it.
Yeah,
You say, I don't get it. So
Yeah.
I'm open to doing that. That'll make life easier too.
and you're not necessarily attacking the person, you're just, why?
Yeah, why?
Yeah, not being afraid to ask why.
Well, I think an example of that is you can look at the first day of school at the primary school that parents were flipping out. We thought the plan was great, everything was gonna run smooth, it was gonna be hunky-dory, and then get into the reality of it. We had to make adjustments. Some of it was, some of the things that should have happened before first day of school didn't happen. Contractors didn't necessarily get all the work done that was supposed to be done, so that created some unexpected issues, but we're not willing to step back and hear from the other side. We're not gonna be as effective and efficient as we could be.
I wonder if the board would be willing to entertain decision-making protocol for a bit, to kind of feel out a couple protocols and see if there's some decision-making protocols that would work for us, that help us dig into, if we have a decision we're making, maybe there are some questions that we need to ask before we all say yay or nay, right? Like, who will benefit the most from this decision and who won't? I mean, if we ask that question, that would be an interesting conversation to make sure we're making sure that if we have, as a board, committed to moving a goal forward, and if it's not in alignment with movement of that goal, then we need to second guess it. There are a lot of decision-making protocols, I think, that we could explore as a board that might work for us, and we could put some together, make our own, but just practice using some of those protocols to help us engage in some of these great ideas about dialogue. So we don't get stuck maybe behaving like we have in the past, or saying yes because we're too afraid to have some hard conversations. It just opens up the door for that.
It's almost like having a checklist of things that we need to make sure we're addressing.
Yeah, yes. There's some examples if you'd like.
When you first started, like, oh, what do you mean by that? That's good.
Yeah.
Very well, good. Well, that concludes the GC one board purpose, so we'll move on to GC two, the governing commitments. So the first topic on that is the board's focus and commitments. What should be the board's primary focus, student results, operational expectations, or both? How do we ensure our governance stays focused on results rather than administrative detail? And what does it mean for us to align our decisions with vision, mission, values, and equity? Sure.
First thing that comes to mind is primary focus being ensuring the best educational results for our students. Secondly, I want to just talk a little bit about the governance focus on results. And I've said this before, I think we need to create working agreements. I think we should have working agreements within the board and within you know, our relationship with Mr. Board and our relationship with the administration. I think there should be working agreements. We should use agendas to drive our focus, make sure that they stay focused on what we have committed ourselves to the public, and hold one another accountable. And for the last one, what does it really mean to align our decisions to the vision, mission, values, and equity? To me, it means that we have made a commitment to our community, and we will follow through on that promise.
For all of this, let's see, I think with the first one, both, I think one may lead to the other. Sometimes we expect that operational levels will improve students' results. We hope to see improve. As the students' results improve, I think it'll be easier to up the expectations. Of course, I'm the kind of person that I set my goal right here, and there's nothing else to go higher. That's where I set my goal. And so I don't think we can get there immediately. I think we're gonna have to work up for the expectations. But as far as administration, will be giving us updates. We'll have to ask ourselves, how does that line up with the results that we want? And keep asking ourselves what results we do want and how are we getting there? Are we getting there? Always ask if our decisions are that we're making are aligning with our goals. Keeping the vision, the values always at the front. We need to stay constant, not wavering with our vision. With this and making our decisions as it affects us equally. That's all I have for this.
Well, for the first one, I think that these go hand in hand. I think the better the operational results, the better the student results will be. I think it'll just be kind of a natural fit. How do we stay focused on results rather than administrative detail? I think a big thing is we have to trust our administration and not micromanage. And I think, you know, by switching these roles, we're going to be learning all the way through it as well, because all of a sudden we're going from the left all the way over to a different way of doing things. So I think that there's gonna be hiccups as we go through this. But I do feel that we just have to have trust, I mean, and trust in what they're doing. As far as the last one, and how do we align our decisions, I think we set realistic and obtainable goals. I think that's really important, and every decision we make is to how we obtain and keep these in the way that we want them.
Yeah, so most of my stuff has already been said. I think they're absolutely tied together. Depending on, obviously what part of operations you're thinking about, but oftentimes operations has a direct effect or result on student results. Holding everybody accountable to our model. I mean, as we go down this road, we establish, those roles, responsibilities, roadblocks and road guards and all that stuff. It'll become easier for us to hold one another accountable to those. As far as what does it mean to align our decisions with vision, mission, values, and equity? Establishing measurable goals, SMART goals, hopefully, and is what comes of through the strategic planning process, where we can easily measure those, and following through on what it is we say we're gonna do.
For the first part, we'll have to decide what is truly the most important thing. If it is student outcomes, then everything folds into how do we best achieve those student outcomes, whatever we decide those are. We have to check each other. If we start going down a path, and we're not be afraid for us to raise a hand if administration's doing something, administration come to us and say, hey, hold on guys, maybe you're getting off the path a little bit. I just wrote down no shiny objects, but it's easy to get distracted. We set this goal and all of a sudden, hey, oh, there's this new curriculum that just came out. Okay, does that get us here? Or is it just the nice shiny fun new thing? And if that is truly all that is, then we have to shove that aside. Have to frame things in questions on the whys and hows. If we decide to do this, how will that affect what our goals are? Why is making this decision benefit what we're trying to accomplish? And so with any of the aligning our decisions, it's just that it's any decision we make has to be answered in that, with that lens on, that does this answer whatever our goal is? And does doing that help achieve what we set out to do?
Yeah, after all that, all I can add is, once the expectations are set, using the data from the updates and following through.
Anything else from folks on the board's focus and commitments? All right, so we'll move on then to policy development and revision. How often should we review and revise our policies? Should revisions require a simple majority, a supermajority, or something else? How do we balance stability in our governance with flexibility to adjust policies? Mrs. Thompson. You get the tough one.
Thank you. I put down for revision for policy is as needed. I don't know if 3, 5 years. You look over and you see if they're working, great, improve them a little bit, keep them moving up, like I said before. If you identify they're not using or they're not working, I would say immediately, start revising them instead of letting it just fail. As far as the majority vote, I put down, I guess I have simple majority, on here. That was a tough one for me, trying to figure that out. of what, I felt, because I feel like there will be things we will not all agree on. But going with, I guess, the majority would probably be my idea on that. I think even if, let's say, I didn't agree to something, I think I would understand why the approach would be, what the approach would be in understanding that. So like I said, then I kind of feel like, well, then it'd be all in agreement. That was a tough one for me on that one. Then I have underneath of that, we have a line in governance that doesn't move. So for how do we balance stability and governance with flexibility of adjusting policies? Move that over here to, we have a stable structure that encourages adaptable processes, shared decision-making and feedback. We should be able to, so we could allow for adjustments without undermining the overall system's stability with it. Staying stable with being flexible. How about that? Yeah.
I put down how often should we review and revise our policy? I just think it never hurts to do it annually, just to kind of take a look and see if we need to adjust. I said, the simple majority, super majority, I think one of the advantages that, the four of us have over Jill, Brian and Tiffany is that we just did a complete overhaul of so many things and brought everything, a lot of things up to date. And so I would say, honestly, I would probably vote for a simple majority. And then how do we balance stability and governance? You know, I agree with Tiffany, we have policies in place and we adjust them as needed.
Yes, I put down every 3 years. The reason for that is just with the cycle of board member terms, it allows every 3 years as people change to revise your policies, look at them and revise them without being really, really redundant and doing it repeatedly. As far as the majority, simple majority or something else, that was a tough one for me too, especially going further down this list and tying it back to the question I already answered, actually changed my mind. And I have the majority of the board, which is a super majority. 2/3 of the board, five people. And the reason for that is, depending on how, board members that are present, not present at meetings, if you just have a simple majority, it can have a different effect on something. So having a more of a super majority of the board shows more alignment from my perspective, especially as we go on further into this. And I think a lot of us will probably answer our own question on that one as well. That's where my mind is at on it. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got.
I actually had, how often should we review and revise? Could be, I put sliding scale based on the need. Is it something that we just put into place, we find out in a hurry that, hey, this isn't attainable, or we missed a piece of the puzzle to actually have it be an effective tool. Things are going well, and if we have a 5-year, 10-year vision, some of those things might need to be that 5 or 10 year down the road, so we're not going to look at those quite often. And for the majority piece of that, I thought of that kind of like the policy, that if it's a technical change, so if it really doesn't change the essence of what we're trying to do, that can be a simple majority. But if we're looking at doing an overhaul of something, that having that be the super majority, 5/7, like Karen said, It's something as simple as punctuation or whatever, when you want the policy. It doesn't really affect the essence of what it is, just might clean it up a little bit to have it make more sense or be a little bit easier to digest. I think we can do that with a simple majority. And then when Tiffany was talking with the bend don't break type of thing, you have skyscrapers in California, in Japan, that are super strong, but they have to be flexible to withstand an earthquake. So these steel and glass structures, they move. So I think we have to, I don't think we can be rigid in any of this. Because if we get rigid, then all of a sudden, in terms of, well, we have to throw that away because we can't fix it that way. So if we build in some adjustability to what we're doing, an open dialogue and purpose versus alignment. So if we're having honest conversations and I don't feel the same way that somebody else feels, being able to talk through those things. And some of that might end up being willingness to have late nights, which happened a while back, that there were very late nights. We've been very fortunate that with some of the things that we've had to deal with recently, that we haven't had to get into the 11, 12 o'clock cutoff time. So the willingness to know that this is, we're essentially volunteering to do this. We'd be willing to say, hey, you know what, we need to really dig through this. We have to work through whatever our differences might be.
The only thing I would touch on is the review and revise policies. Really what's reasonable, flexibility in that. I was thinking kind of a biennial thing, or every 2 years, just for the simple fact that boards constantly change. And if you do, like you said, 3 years, there's a possibility if somebody's not digging into policy when they first get on the board, they may never see what the policies are if they don't want to look at them. I mean, when I first got on the board, that was basically my reading for the first month was just policies, going through policies. So just don't want somebody to miss out on that if they're new to the board.
We just all need to commit right now that this is gonna be a long-term endeavor for us. That Brady's gonna be the model for 20 years, 30 years of. So as long as I think if we're doing our job and we're willing to do it, we're having fun doing it. Right?
Why, of course.
That's everybody laughing. It's fun.
I had 3 years down too, and now I'm listening and it does make a lot of sense when we think about the rotation of the board members themselves. I put every 3 years on a cycle, and then I put "and" in big bold letters with the underline. Anytime a policy is not in alignment with our vision and mission, we have to have the courage to bring it up and make sure that it's doing what it was intended to do, reviewing the purpose and the outcome. And if we have the courage to do that, I think that, and not be so rigid, but flexibility, that's a better practice in making sure that, we are recognizing that we're human and that we can make adjustments as well. And if it is serving our community the way it was intended, that we can change it. I like the idea. I really love the idea actually of majority when it comes to technical things and majority when it comes to more adaptive components of a policy. And I also wrote revisions should be carried out on a timeline, making sure that there is never revision made when emotions are high. And what I mean by that is in response to, right, an event or something that happened. We may have to maybe be very careful about checking ourselves to make sure our emotions are high. if we do it right, we'll have those policies done ahead of time. But we won't always do it right.
Yes, questions for all, maybe the board can help with the answer. How do we know when we need to revise policy? Right now with our school policies, we have a company that that's their role, that's their job, is to make sure state statutes, Wisconsin laws and all those things are in alignment. How do we make sure that the policies that we come up with for ourselves have a checks and balance, have a way to be reviewed? Because if we all agree on something and think, yeah, this is going great, and we never see that, and we can't necessarily see what's happening right in front of your face. Is there a way for us to really have that checks and balance?
Great question.
Yeah, it is a good question. I think one of the things that I would ask you to consider is you kind of have to go back 249 years to 1776, when the forefathers were writing the Constitution. It's kind of what you're doing here. You're writing the Constitution for the Richland School District School Board, right? And how they're going to operate. So, you know, when you're writing these things, these governing policies and the policies as it relates to the board, not the Neola ones, not the operational ones, but I think you're gonna wanna make sure that you're cognizant of not necessarily how does this group of 7 work together, but what happens with any given election where 3 rogue people get on with an entirely different agenda, and how does what we do, how does this Constitution, quote unquote, protect us from them being able to move too fast? Or from people who don't wanna advance. You don't want this to also hold us back so much, right? You don't wanna have, for instance, a unanimous in order to make any changes, right? Where one person can literally hold your board hostage from being able to move forward. So I think you really have to think about, what does it look like if on any given April, 3 people that have the exact opposite views of what I have, what does that look like? And how do we prevent, not necessarily change from happening, because maybe that's a change that needs to happen, but that it doesn't happen that June, right? When they're elected in April. And so, because you want this to stand the test of time. So I'm kind of answering your question here, Scott, in a roundabout way, but I think you kind of want to write these things with the idea that we're not really going to be making a lot of changes, right? We might have to make some amendments along the way, and we may have to make some, but think about what the forefathers did 250 years ago. That's impressive that it's still around, and that's your challenge, right? To try to do something that stands the test of time, so it's not so specific that it doesn't stand the test of time, but yet it's not so broad that it doesn't accomplish what you want to accomplish. I just think you want to really think about, how do you get the bend but don't break? How do you give people an opportunity to revise policy, but yet not make it so easy that it can be brought up with any heightened emotion? I heard that, you know, and when emotions are high, I don't know that can be answered in a 5-minute conversation, but I think that's really something that you're gonna wanna consider. And what does this look like 10 years from now, right? With different board members and different people and different personalities. This group clearly gets along very well and respects one another, but that hasn't always been the case with boards. How do you listen to them, protect them, give them a voice, but yet protect the integrity of what you're trying to do?
Thank you for that, because that was the road that I was going down with my, it was my turn. I was having a hard time figuring out a way to be PC about it. But yes, that was exactly the reasons why I went down the supermajority road, because people change, and then the people that show up to a meeting can influence things, and if you make it too easy, things can change very quickly. So, thank you for that. That was exactly what I was trying to say nicely. All right, anything else in that?
Well, give me a little, or give us, John and I, a little direction. Is this something that you want to think about and maybe recycle back again on? Do you want us to, I mean, I heard a lot of different things, but it's kind of a big topic. There's three small bullet points, but this is kind of a big topic, and I want to make sure that you folks have ample time to fully digest what that should look like. So I think we've got the notes of what we have heard, but if anybody has anything to add, I'd welcome that. If you want to make sure that we hit this again at the next meeting, I would consider that too, because I do think bend but don't break and being strong but flexible there's going to be a delicate balance there when it comes to the ability to change how the board operates as a whole. So, Tom, do you have anything to add on that?
Well, my thought on it is, by the time we get through all 9 these things and having these discussions, that could probably, well, Aaron already said it, that by the time I got to the end of it, I had some different thoughts and stuff that came before it. So obviously, we're for me, my vision on this is run all 9 and then you go back and discuss anything that we need to review and have that open conversation like we've been talking about, that, hey, you know what, I had this thought. I don't necessarily think that what I thought before is the same anymore, that kind of thing. So obviously it's not gonna just be a nine meeting conversation. It's gonna take, I think it's gonna take longer than that. To really digest it. So right now, I'm okay with where we're at on it, because it could change as we go through the other 70s. But I can be overruled, so I can be convinced otherwise. Sorry.
I agree with that.
Agreed.
Thanks for the question, Steve.
All right, so we're gonna move on. Board superintendent relationship. How should we define the superintendent's responsibility for achieving results? What boundaries should exist between the governance, the board, and management, superintendent? And how do we hold the superintendent accountable without micromanaging? Ms. Troxel, you're up to bat.
Okay, no pressure. I'm it for Mr. Board. Well, I think, how do we define the superintendent's responsibility for achieving results? I think with staff staying, I think with student success, and with the community's trust. I think that's how we, all 3 of those things combined will show the superintendent's responsibility on results. What boundaries should exist? Again, I'm gonna repeat, we're individual people, so we will have different concerns at different times. And I think honest communication is always the key. We have to be able to be very honest and upfront and right back at us. How do we hold the superintendent accountable without micromanaging? I think we've said it several times during this conversation tonight, it all begins with trust. And I think if we hear of concerns, we need to address them immediately and deal with them if there's something that's out there and, needs to be brought up. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I said like trust, open communication, not being afraid to have the hard conversations, holding one another accountable, measurable. Those were the high points for me. Otherwise, yes, I think we hit a lot of this stuff. Another one of those.
I have that, responsible, 100% responsible for results on board directed objectives. So if we say we want this to happen, Mr. Board is 100% responsible for that. Might be that it needs to come back to us for guidance, that kind of thing, so it goes back to communication. But our superintendent is really our, sports analogies, kind of the general manager. That he has his managers and coaches underneath him, he answers to the owners, which happens to be us and the school board. The boundaries between governance versus management, expectation versus execution. But we're responsible for setting the expectations. Steve's responsible for the execution of those expectations. Checks and balances with acknowledgement of separation of roles. So if anybody comes to us and says, hey, you guys might be pushing things a little bit, Steve might be the one that says, hey, you know what, you asked me to do this, now leave me alone, let me just do it. Or it could be us going to Steve or any of the other administration that, hey, we expected this to happen, we're not seeing anything going on, so we just need to get realigned. And then how do we hold accountable without micromanaging? Setting benchmarks and targets, review, report, then align with the end result in mind. We have to make sure that the goals that are being set are actually understood. It could be perception, our perception of what we want to see at the end isn't necessarily the perception of what the administration sees to be.
So I actually had a question on the last one. I agree with the other sections. My question on that was, we talked a lot about goals and setting the goals and getting to the goals. In the process of hold the superintendent accountable, are we going to be doing evaluations? So if that's part of it, that could be one of the ways that we can keep focus.
Yes, we did the evaluation. Excuse me, and we'll continue to do it. How it looks and feels will be different.
Well, that was the next question. That's probably gonna have to change in some areas.
Yeah, the template we currently have it's gonna have to change. Now there's something that will determine.
I didn't want to start. We weren't.
Don't want to steal your thunder, Brittany.
Yeah, I agree with everything as far as how we define the superintendent's responsibility. I also, when we're thinking about achieving results, understanding the variability that comes year to year with students and, all the things. I think that it's important that we are always thinking about progress over perfection. And thinking through what does progress look like right now this year, or 3 years from now, just understanding, when we understand the who better, we can make much better goals. And then moving those goals forward through progress. Boundaries should exist. I have, when it comes to management, I think a communications plan, we have to have a communication plan that we are all understanding, we're all in agreement on. I completely agree on checks and balances. And then for the last one, I wrote, I think that we need to set some clear, predictable checks throughout the school year. So, that they're scheduled, we know that he knows exactly when. Maybe it's quarterly, whatever we decide on. So clear, predictable checks throughout the school year on those things that the community wants us to focus on.
With what I do, everything has a written plan. Everything has a plan. So I put down here for the first one is just a clear set of written expectations and a written district goals. Just have everything written out clearly, with the plan of what the focus is. The focus on measurable outcomes tied to our vision, financial health, educational quality. I like what you said about the perception, understood, because what I may think should be is gonna be different than someone else, but whatever that goal is clearly defined so that, everyone has the same perception of the understanding on that. Trust was another thing that I had on the top of this. What boundaries should exist between the governance board, the management. Definitely, I guess the best way of putting it is professional, boundaries. I just think sometimes when there's people in management and they get too close to the workers, then I don't want to say favoritism happens or whatever, but just keeping the clear boundaries of everything. I think that's why they move managers constantly, so that everything stays professional through it. Set a timeline for our goals, building and maintaining a strong leadership team is one of the things I have down here for how should we define his responsibilities is definitely building and maintaining a strong leadership team.
One of the thoughts I had, I'm sure we'll get into this once we actually start setting goals and such, is we will have expectations for different things to get done. We have to support our administration, support Steve. We have to give them the tools to be able to do their job. So whether that's this widget, making financing available, whatever the case might be. I just wanted to share that while it's just top of my head, because that's, if we don't give somebody the tools to do their job,
Correct.
then all we're doing is kind of setting them up to fail.
Any other discussion?
One other thing I had on here was, being upfront about the challenges builds credibility too. If it's us that we're trying to meet our challenges, or just the challenges that is coming back from the district, just being upfront with it. If we are so-called tying your hands behind your back while we're asking you to do this, just come out and go, I need this and this and this in order to reach that goal. Because sometimes we don't know. We're not perfect.
It's okay to ask for help.
Yeah.
You're not on that.
It might be, but I'm on it with lots and lots of great people.
All right, so board culture and operations. What does it mean for us to function as a single unit practice? How should we handle disagreements among board members once a vote has been taken? How do we make meetings transparent, efficient, and accessible to the community? Excuse me. So this is the one that made me rethink the prior one, the policy development revision. As we talked prior, and even as I went through this, it was the same thing as not being afraid to have the hard conversations. It's okay to disagree. But at the end of the day, we should be, compromising. We should be collaborating and creating alignment. Where at least, not just a simple majority, but at least a super majority can agree with what we're doing. Because making these decisions and it's constantly a 3-4, 4-3, that's not exactly healthy either. We're not figuring out a way to agree to disagree and change and modify and adapt and grow and be nimble, all those little buzzwords and such. Then we're not doing something right. Going back to your communication processes and paths types of things. That's what made me rethink the other one, just based on a couple of those, those buzzwords. Not saying that we have to 100% agree on 100% of everything, absolutely not. But at least coming to some consensus where pretty much for the most part, all can pretty much agree. And not consistently have division. Handling disagreements, obviously, soliciting that feedback, adapting and changing in the future, kind of ties in with the same one. How do you function as a single unit? Disagreements are okay, disagreements can be healthy, just how do you overcome them and learn from them and not avoid them in the future, but not be afraid to, confront it when it happens. As far as making meetings more transparent, efficient, and accessible to the community, I'm not a communications marketing guy. I think what we're doing is pretty good as far as, we open it up to the observer. We open it up to, to Rod and Ben and folks on YouTube. We're recording and posting. We have communications on the Facebook pages, the papers. Mr. Board does the morning show. I'm sure there's some other ways we can do it. I'm at a loss on any new ideas on that, so. But open to listen to anybody else. That's all I really have on that.
Well, I've said this before because kind of had a conversation earlier, being open to debate, sharing thoughts before having a vote, but then once the vote is decided on whether it's yes or no, that we support and have one voice as we go into the community. If it ends up being like a 4-3 vote, that the three that were the opposition support whatever that vote was actually for. Having adult conversations, willingness to have a private discussion to better understand where each of us is coming from. If that needs to be mediated or moderated, so be it. Maybe it's just sitting down having I was gonna say a cup of coffee, but I don't drink coffee, so I can't really say that, but just sitting down and spending time with each other, and it might even be just in a private setting. And then kind of to Aaron's point, we can do all of the things that we're doing. But if the community doesn't engage in it, how effective is it? So I don't know, because with the live stream, if there's a chat option for the community to be able to post comments, questions, whatever, that then we would address later. We would never do it during the meeting. And then asking to continue what we're doing, but what is the public commitment? And what we're trying to do here is, do they care? If they don't, how can we engage to make sure that we're really getting a good broad spectrum of what the community really wants? Next.
Yeah, I would just agree. The vote sets the result of the vote sets the direction. And then that's the direction you go with. It's the only thing I'll add to that, but otherwise, no, I'm in agreement.
Nothing that hasn't already been said, I'll just read what I wrote down, agree, to disagree is okay. Next decisions remain the decision regardless of one. I feel like everyone's on the same page with that. That feels really good. I think we can spend some time trying to understand each person's perspective. Seeking to understand and leaning into hard conversations is a skill. And so I think it's okay, for us to challenge one another and say, I'm reading your body language. Am I wrong that you're still thinking about this before we move forward? And just encouraging one another to have that conversation. And then lastly, when we think about transparency and accessibility is a large part of the work I do right now and has been all of my career. And now even more than ever, I feel like, and like I had said before earlier in the meeting, if people are not feeling like they can engage because there are barriers to engagement, barriers to even communication, that's problematic on our end. We need to do better. And so we need to really understand what are the barriers to engagement. It's not, maybe some people this is just doesn't work for them. We need to dig into that a little bit. And what if we have deaf or hard of hearing people? What if there are people in our community who are visually impaired? What if there are, not only Hispanic speaking, but other native languages spoken in our community, and their children and their taxpayers and their children come here, or their taxpayers? Are we considering everyone? And I think that the more we have these conversations about who are these decisions benefiting and who aren't they, who haven't we considered, I think the more equitable our policies are gonna be.
I have to say a lot of everything's already been taken. Definitely, as far as functioning as a single unit, I just keep remembering that one film that you showed all the arrows in alignment. We're all moving in the same direction. In the end, we're all going in the same direction. We may agree to disagree on some things. We need to move on. We need to, get along regardless of whether we all agree or not. We still respect each other. I guess the one thing that keeps coming to my mind for all these questions and all of this stuff, as all of us for a board, it's almost like a marriage. You're not always gonna agree. You're gonna have to, in the end, you're going for the same goal. You're gonna have to compromise. You're gonna have to do whatever it is, and eventually get there. And I look of the one thing about challenging each other, getting us to step out of our comfort zone, because that's the only way we're gonna grow. And we're gonna be able to, in the end, feel like, oh, I just, accomplished something because somebody challenged me to step out of my comfort zone. Which is good. That's the way we're gonna grow, and we're gonna be proud of ourselves, in the end, is doing that. As far as being transparent with everything, yeah, I feel like we're kind of doing everything we are right now, with doing things online. It's just getting them to engage, and getting them to engage might take a little bit when they might be shocked with the fact that we're coming out going, hey, we want your input for a change, and they might be shocked at first, and it might take them a little bit to feel comfortable enough to go, oh yeah, here's some ideas with it. One thing I do have on here is good board members respect collectivism and excel at being an excellent contributor to the group, that everyone contributes to it.
Well, I don't know if I can say much more because it's probably great. I think for me, I have been in meetings where we haven't always agreed. I mean, even though, there's times, where so much of us, we are in agreement. I have been in meetings where we haven't agreed, but I have always tried to figure out how can we meet in the middle? How can we come to a decision that we all can live with? And so that's something that I think is really important. But in the end, we're united when we make that final decision. Again, I think, I'm really proud of our board, because I think we do have that great respect for each other, and I think we can learn from each other. And as far as, I don't know, I agree with Aaron. I don't know how much more we can be transparent, other than if we just find different ways to reach the public that, right now, I don't know, maybe that they're more comfortable with. Maybe it's not the online version or coming to a meeting in person, but if there's just some way we can, have some more options.
A couple things that popped in my head when we're talking, especially if there's some harder decisions. If they're not a time bound thing that, hey, we have to make this decision because it will create X, Y, and Z. We learn from Mr. Strang that we can, I don't think it's called table, but we can postpone a vote. We can have that come back later so that we can digest, we can maybe have different conversations, we can do our own research on maybe why we feel this way, or maybe try to understand why the other folks are feeling the opposite. So we hadn't had that opportunity. And then just thinking about the community, they might not participate because they might not feel they're being listened to, or might fear that they won't be listened to. City council just had a vote on Story Field. Well, a lot of people don't feel that they were heard. How much are they gonna communicate if they don't feel like they're being heard? So I hope that that's not what's happening right now. I think it's just the school gonna do what the school does, and people don't always get involved in it. Usually people that are involved are the same people involved in everything. How do we reach out to those other people? How do we engage with that? So.
Let me just jump in with a couple of side notes, because I was thinking Story Field as well. Part of me wonders if, when the board starts talking about the things that are really important to the public, if they don't naturally become more engaged, and maybe they're not engaged now because they don't really care about things that are being discussed and time's being taken up at board meetings. Because when there are hot topics, there have been people that have shown up, but it shouldn't have to be a hot topic. It should just be the things that they're interested in, or the things that they value. And so if we do a good job of making sure that we're talking about the things that is a priority to the community, maybe we get some more natural engagement as well.
I've always wondered, and I understand, deeply understand why we have limits on who talks, how long, all the things, right? And I always, every time I'm in a board meeting or any other meeting where we're giving guidelines about who can talk, what they can say, how long, gotta be written down, all these procedural things, how unwelcoming that protocol is. And I understand why it has to be there, but I wonder how else we can present opportunities for our public to be heard in ways where we are actually saying, listen, we're not gonna make you jump all through all these hoops, and, we just wanna hear your voice, give us your voice. And I think that we as a board can be thinking about different ways to make that happen. Because if you've ever done it before, I have, it's not a welcoming experience. As hard as we try to make it that way, it just isn't. It's like testifying in court, it just doesn't feel that way. And so if you have people who feel strongly about something and you actually want to hear them, then I'm wondering if we have different avenues to consider or means of getting that information that might not be so intimidating for folks.
I would say something that it's getting into details, so I don't run out. That's where it's gonna be hard with the whole not micromanaging and managing versus something. I think we all have ideas on that, we get deeper into the conversation than where we get off topic, we'll say. Like I just did. Just saying.
All right. Voice and continuous improvement. How should we include student voice in our decision making? What processes should we use to gather community and staff input? What should continuous improvement look like for our board? Example, debriefs, retreats, training.
Yes, I think we develop a partnership with the student council for them to share the voice of the students. Maybe, and going on Jill's thought, maybe we have a quarterly or whatever the time frame is, kind of an open mic session.
That's exactly what I was trying.
Especially for the kids, because.
Yeah.
You know, there's gonna be kids that will never come here and speak in front of adults that they have no clue who they are, but they're willing to tell their friends. So maybe it's a gathering. I think our student council will definitely be that conduit. They're student leaders, and I think they should be, hopefully they're already doing it, and getting input and things that they feel that they can take care of and taken care of. Or maybe it's more pointed, more specific that, hey, we want to hear back from the students. High school, I think is easy. We'll have to work on a way to get the voices from the primary school and the intermediate school. We will be here, just being in this building, might be a barrier to that. Gathering input from the staff and community, having town hall meetings, having open forums, probably not here. Having it in a different location that maybe it's moving those locations around. Maybe we get involved in the county board meetings where we're at township meetings or something like that, where when we at least have an exposure there at those meetings. With the staff having cohort, the group leaders. So same thing with student council, be able to let them know that we are open to hearing their thoughts. Obviously, we need to be careful that we're not overstepping the policies with what needs to be moved up the chain of command to supervisors and administrators and then district administrator. And I said before, maybe it's having coffee with the Board of Education. Have a coffee with the president, have a coffee with whatever. And then as far as the continuous improvement, we absolutely need to do that. WASB has an annual survey that is free. That we can take that and have a review of that. We can just have quarterly focused topics where we specifically look at one specific thing that we're doing, like the 4 meetings that or 4 presentations that we had with Mr. Strang and such. And then maybe we do a review and recap every other meeting or whatever timeline we decide that, hey, did we actually maintain our focus on our number 1 priority is? And if that number 1 priority that we decide is student outcomes, then we review that to make sure that we're actually doing it.
So I would just jump to the continuous improvement part of it. For the board, are there webinars that are available for the topic that we're discussing that would help us build our knowledge on that? Retreats, they've always been hard to schedule just because 7 people going in 7 different directions. So it makes it difficult for that. I think other than that, it's been set, so I'll leave it at that.
How should we include student voice in our decision making? I loved all of it, except I'm gonna challenge a little bit around student council, and I'm gonna ask us to think about who is likely to be on the student council, and are those students representing our high school, middle school as a whole. And so I just want us to be thinking about, although the purpose of student council is a great purpose, and they, yes, should be the conduit or the voice of the entire building. Historically, in my experience, that has never been the case. And so I wonder if there are other ways that we can get student voice in addition to the student council. I'm not saying that they're not a good voice, but I think there are additional ways that we can get input from students. So that we're reaching all of our kids and all of our kids actually feel like they have a voice. what processes should we use to gather community and staff input. I feel like I broke the record tonight, but I continue to come back to center the voices of the people most affected by decision. I think we need to be asking ourselves every time we have a topic, we have to ask ourselves, who is closest to this subject matter? Who is affected by this decision? And if we don't understand deeply the perspective of those people that are closest to what is going to happen when we make this decision, then we need to do more research. So make participation accessible is another thing that I wrote down, which we talked about before, but accessible doesn't just mean like they understand the language. It means that they feel welcome and trusted, like we're gonna hear them. And then lastly, continuous improvement means a lot of different things for me because I've done a lot of continuous improvement in my career. And so the first thing I wrote down is that we just have to, first of all, come up with a shared definition of what is continuous improvement for a board. What does that even mean? What is continuous improvement for a board? Understanding the terms is important. Making sure that we're always improvement focused, but it's strategic. It's strategic. It's not willy-nilly. It's not just grab the, flavor of the day. It's very strategic around what do we need to know in order to make sure that we are working in alignment with the mission, vision, values, and goals. And if it's just something cool to understand and it takes a lot of time, then we have to say no. We need to spend our time somewhere else.
Jill said it perfectly. I was thinking the same, I have the exact same thing written down here for the student council. It should represent the student body, but does it represent the whole student body? And if you think back to when you were in school, how do you get your voice heard with that you said it perfectly. One thing I thought of with the process of how we could gather the community and staff input, even from like the younger grades, or even here, is just going with meeting with the staff or having them come, like the department, the English department, they can get together, put all their voices together, and then have one person be the spokesman for the English department. Come and let their voice be heard from the whole English department, or from whatever department it is in the school. That's one way of getting heard. As far as the kids, maybe having a fun little assignment with the teacher, with the kids, getting the kids to tell the teacher, if the teacher says, hey, what would you like to see done? And have them all, have her write it down, have her come and present it. All the third graders, all the fourth graders, all the, just to give us an idea of what, that's one way of letting them be heard. I love the open mic night, that's what I wrote down here. Maybe quarterly, just not a hot topic. Hot topics, yes, I understand, there's gonna be boundaries set, because it's gonna be a lot, but if there's not a hot topic and we just open it up and we wanna hear what the community has to say, we're gonna open it up. Feel free to come, voice your opinion, open mic, you get to say what you wanna say. And then we can take all that, go back and digest it, study on it, come back to the next meeting, and then, discuss what that was, but not really discuss anything of the topics of that night or whatever that's brought to the open mic night, but just, be able to go digest it and come back and give feedback with it. With our continuous improvement, definitely the webinars. I think of all the little emails that we get that has the different things. I watch all the little videos and stuff like that. with my job, continuing education is something we have to do every year. We have to get so many credits in. It's all gotta be new stuff. It's gotta hit so much here, so much here, so much here. You know, to be improving, you have to be learning. So that's what I've got.
Well, I think that, I think we have a lot of, great students on student council. I think when they give their reports and they're just really, rock stars in all the events they do. But I also feel that kids are, sometimes intimidated. And, because I think there's this vision of, they're the popular kids. And, I'm gonna give you a prime example. When we were gonna have our 10-year class reunion, and, you know, I was a successful person, but they said, what are your ideas? And I immediately thought, oh my gosh, they're gonna listen to me, my ideas, and I panicked. But I mean, that's how you feel, is sometimes, you know, you don't wanna feel foolish or anything like that. And so I think, if there's another, and I agree that, I think student council would be a great, venue, but I'm just trying to figure out how do we get all the students to participate in that and feel comfortable sharing. I think for the most part, as far as together, community and staff input, I think that's already been, I think everything has been great, what everyone has shared. Continuous improvement look like for our board. One of the things that, I was in a meeting this week with Southwest Tech, and one of the questions was, how can we reach students and, to get students more involved and the parents more involved. And Dr. Johnson was also in that meeting, and I'm trying to think of ideas, and all of a sudden, she said, well, this is what we do. Guidance meets with these juniors and seniors, and they do all this stuff, and I thought, I didn't even know that. I mean, I didn't know exactly, and I thought, that's important to kind of know what they're sharing for that student's success. And I mean, I learned a lot from Dr. Johnson that day of what we're actually are doing. So I really like the idea of maybe kind of knowing, what's happening within the school, so that when you go to these meetings, you realize, we are doing that and we've got that covered. I do think that sometimes the board meetings are very structured. And I think sometimes a retreat would be nice, because I think then we can really speak honestly, we can speak openly about successes, but also about concerns that we have. So I do like the idea of a debriefing or a retreat or something like that.
This was a difficult one for me. There's so many things that current state bind us in some of these things, as far as getting the student voices, staff input. There's policies in place that kind of prevent us from doing that. There's, chain of commands, there's, we have one employee, it's Mr. Gord. We can't go to a school and solicit feedback from students, teachers, anything. It's against it's against policies. So how do we get that? Because it is valuable to get. We're gonna probably have to get creative in how we approach some of these things. Because there's a lot of value to it, but we've also got a lot of other things ethically that are roadblocks for us. The same thing with your example, having coffee with the board president. I mean, you can't really do that either. There's laws and ethics against that as well. Or going to county board meetings and such, acting as a board member, you can't do that. There's laws and ethics that bind us from that as well. So there's a lot of things that, while we can do it, we absolutely can. We have to be aware of our own boundaries, our own road guards that prohibit us from doing certain things a certain way. I just want to throw that out there. This was a very challenging one for me because these things are very important, but there's also a lot of guiding principles that are roadblocks for us, that we have to get creative and figure out different pathways maybe and how to get there. Mr. Board, do you have anything you want to like add to that?
I have a question real quick. Are those current policies that are state mandated policies, or are they our current board policies?
And I'd have to touch base with Mr. Strang to find out which ones are local control and which ones are not. So I don't know.
There's a
Can't
mix
answer
of
that.
both, I believe, I just don't know. I know that there's ethics and other laws that prohibit some of those things. So I just don't know what specifically they are. You know, the board can give somebody power and authority to represent the board at something. You can absolutely do that, but that's what I'm saying, like, there has to be a clear understanding from everybody, you know, what we can and can't do in these situations, whether it's out in the public, within our own buildings, or, yeah. So I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Board.
No, I was just gonna say, piggybacking off what Aaron was saying, that, remember, it doesn't have to be doesn't have to be directly student to the board or staff to the board. The board can establish guidelines to ensure that those things are being considered. For instance, the board could say, we want to make sure that every building has a student advisory group made up of students and teachers, or, solicits feedback from students, but that doesn't necessarily have to come directly to the board. That can be administration can be a conduit for that. The same way for staff, while it might not be appropriate, and there's probably some laws that may prohibit, staff members from dealing directly with board members, and all of a sudden now getting into all of the things you're trying to avoid. The board can ensure that staff are being heard by making sure that, these are just examples, every 2 years, we do a full survey on judging our climate and culture from our staff, that they're being heard. So that, we've done the school perceptions and plan on doing one again this fall. This would be the every other year. So, something like that, is that enough? If it's not enough, what other ways can we do it without blurring those lines between having staff, bypass the supervisor, the building administrator, the district administrator, and going right to the board president and venting or whatever, but how can we still hear their voice? So I think there are ways to do it, but I don't necessarily always know that the best way is the most direct, and that's bypassing everybody and going right to the board. I think the board can implement some strategies to ensure that it takes place, though. I think that would be what they're trying to do.
Incompatibility of offices comes to mind. Interference to operations, that's really what it is. And that's a law.
One of the thoughts I had on the continuous improvement. We probably don't know what we don't know. Which happens a lot, especially with being new in a position or wherever the case is. So how do we find out what we don't know? I don't know. If it's looking for guidance from CISA or from OSB or whatever the resources we have available to us, that digging into these various topics. I don't know. And having a retreat or something similar, maybe it's not called a retreat, but where we just get to know each other. That was one of the major struggles that we had when I first came on board. And I think you could see it that for personality conflicts that could never get worked through. Maybe we just spend time with each other. We could figure those things out.
Like on a float.
Do it during a parade, I don't know. As long as it's properly posted.
Is it posted?
Right?
It will be tomorrow morning.
Okay, good.
Darn, it wasn't posted.
It's a special meeting, so it's 24 hours.
We heard you were throwing Cheetos and Fritos and all kinds of things.
out of one of those air cannons.
I signed up your Frito-Lay truck.
Did you know you were going to?
It's gonna need a scrubbing down.
All right.
I do have a couple of things. I'm experiencing some dissonance when we're having this conversation right now, just if you can't tell already. And I think part of it, when I'm exploring, what is that feeling that's coming up in me and why is that happening? I'm feeling as if sometimes getting the data in the raw is just exactly what we need. And when we are asking for data, whether it's student voice, teacher voice, or parent community voice, whatever, to be filtered through a system, that we are opening ourselves up to potential manipulation of the data. And I just want to throw that out there. It could be to soften a blow. It could be to cover something up. It could be, we don't know, right? And it's not that I don't trust our current administration. I'm just thinking about what Mr. Board said before about what is the mark we want to leave when we're establishing these guidelines. I think we have to just be really mindful about how important data in the raw is. And understanding stories behind the data is such an important piece of us being able to do our job well. So summaries are great, but sometimes you gotta hear a story.
I agree. Thank you. Any other closing things from the board?
I guess one thing with the retreat, because I kind of skipped over that, thing, I agree, it would be a good thing to get together in not such a structured environment, you know, so that we do get to know each other, and then, those disagreements are a little easier to work through. And, yeah, just getting to know each of them better.
Start the conversations again. They were going on the first couple of years I was on the board, but it never worked for folks. So, and there's been some board turnover in the last 12 months, which has made it difficult too. So can absolutely have those conversations.
The turnover?
Apple turnovers.
I appreciate the fact that we're willing to put ourselves in those situations and be respectful to one another's workload outside of school, right? So I think there's ways that we could do retreats, whether they're, doesn't have to be an all-day thing, right? It can be 3 hours. But I do think those are important times for the board to spend together.
All right.
I've done a few, I love them.
All I know is Aaron's gonna be drinking a lot of coffee.
Mr. Board, Mr. Bosworth, anything you guys wanna add in closing here? Whether you wanna summarize or?
Good, to get some notes here, we'll get together and type them up, but, John?
No, although,
So we've gotten through GC1, GC2. So the next steps for you guys is just summarize that, coming up with some rough drafts and next month.
Are you ready for some rough drafts, or do you want to get through all of them and then try to do rough drafts? So kind of heard earlier that you might want to rethink some of our thoughts as we get further down the road, so I'm happy to do either. Rough drafts of policies might help the next part have us have an understanding, but there's gonna be a lot of change.
Having so many back-to-back meetings the next 2 months, it might be some value to it. I to see us plowing through a lot of this, so having something wrapped up might not be too bad, unless you all disagree with me.
I don't disagree. I do think that as the discussions continue, as I read through the GCs all the way down to 9, I wonder if some of these conversations will then help inform, like we've said before, right? Like the conversations are bringing us into different ways of being and thinking just by hearing others' thoughts. So I like the process, but, I do wonder if hashing some of this out, continuing to hash it out, won't inform revisions to what our first thoughts were.
You can absolutely revise them.
Take a stab at it.
Yeah.
You
think so.
can take it or toss it.
Yeah, just get the
Yeah.
nuts and bolts together and we'll modify, change and adapt as we go.
I think we all understand we have ways to go before we finalize anything,
Sure.
so if we put together now, it's gonna be fluid.
It'd be good to have as much of this done. We'll definitely get through all of it, what we're doing right now prior to the end of December. It'd be good to have all this done, plus hopefully get some of the policies moving. So when we get into the new year, especially as we're on the strategic planning road, we're already starting to understand our processes better and so we can absolutely adapt and grow, modify and change as we need to.
Take a stab at it.
And I think we can get this format with the bullet points or topics for us to have ahead of time, so having 4 or 5, at least for us to have those ready to go.
Only we had 4 and 5 ready to go.
Excellent. How about 6 and 7? Think about it.
We'll get to that. All right. Any other closing thoughts, statements, discussion? Good. All right, is there a motion to adjourn then?
I'll make a motion.
Dowd made the motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second, Ms. Troxel, discussion. Mr. Dowd?
Aye.
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 All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
There you go.
Ghostbusters, but.
Well, of course you are.
Approve it.
Not in the board.
I know.
And we're outside.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, up and down the hallway.
I always joke at all.
Kind of goes, no bad.
Good luck.
You go, ladies.
All right, beautiful.
Well, I'll pass it on. I'm sure there's
Okay,
probably a
so-
maintenance action item somewhere.
What time, you said 2:45?
Could be.
Yeah, I'm gonna, I want our float. And then, by 2:45, we should all be out.
Where are you gonna be? Cause I'm done at around noon on Friday and I'll be in Wisconsin Dells, so I can come right in.
Yeah, and we're number 20. And so,
Just come right down there.
yeah.
Okay.
Where does it start?
It's like, like 6, 7, and 8.
So, new exec. or
Kind of
something.
like by the laundromat.
Okay.
It's dairy, up from the dairy. Go
Okay.
straight up from the dairy, like you're
So
going.
all on those side
Yeah,
streets?
yep.
Okay.
Don't forget to wear your uniform, everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
What?
gonna have Carissa dressed, and then
Okay.
I've gotta come back up here and pick up her friend, that's gonna be Homer. Homer's gonna get dressed in my car on the way